Yeah, it really surprised me, and it honestly surprises almost everyone I talk to that some matchmakers refuse to even work with women. So I am not one of those. I work with women, but I have a lot of matchmakers. They won't do it, and they look at me like, "You crazy? Like, what are you doing?"
Welcome to Critical Thinking Required, hosted by LBW. This podcast is intended for free thinkers, entrepreneurs, and knowledge seekers. Join us as we discuss relevant financial topics, explore with guests their financial journeys, and engage with experts in industries such as space, media and entertainment, real estate, and many more. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to Critical Thinking Required. You're with your hosts, as you know so well, my two colleagues, Dan Weiss and Nathaniel Leach, and myself, Tim Bickmore. And we have a guest today, Abby Rosenblum. Abby, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And for today's podcast, if our listeners haven't listened to our previous podcast about the social dating apps, we actually have the other side of the story, which is a matchmaker with us today to talk about more of the human interaction and how matchmakers work within this industry, which is so fascinating to learn about. So we're super excited to have Abby with us. Before we jump into Abby's bio, please, if you really enjoy our episode, like, share, and subscribe to our podcast channels. So to jump into get our listeners up to date on who we're speaking with today, I have a small bio I can read for Abby. Abby Rosenblum is the founder and head matchmaker of the Social Modern Matchmaking. Her goal is to bring singles together in a more authentic and intentional way through blind dates and single events. Abby, thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I feel like I watched some episodes and I was like, oh, I should have had a longer bio.
Yeah, I was actually gonna mention, thank you for having a shorter bio. And it's very to the point and it was very well written. So I appreciate that. Sometimes I stumble over my words if it's too long.
Okay, well, then I did good. Keep the short bio.
Abby, you worked for a few years in television. So how did you make the decision to go from television to being a professional matchmaker? Were there professional similarities? I don't quite see the connection between the two. Could you expound upon that?
Yeah, and I don't blame you for not seeing the connection because they aren't really totally connected at all. So I started off in TV. I was a producer, reporter, just kind of Renaissance woman, in TV. These days, they make you do it all so they can save money. Yay. And so I was doing that. I lived in Vegas, and then I ended up moving back to my hometown of Denver, working in TV, and I was single. So I started dating, and I was on every dating app, like literally every single one. And I was someone who went on a ton of dates, couldn't keep track of these poor men, couldn't remember where they were from or who I was talking to. And it was just kind of an arduous journey. So I did find my fiance that way, but I saw all my friends doing the same things. And I thought, why don't I come up with a better way? So I kind of thought of matchmaking. I kind of thought of running people's dating apps for them. I tried a whole bunch of things. And eventually I realized, no, there's not really anyone doing matchmaking how I would want to do it. So I had all my friends just kind of tell me everything they're looking for, all the basic stats, and created Excel spreadsheets and started bringing people together. And on a drunken night, I came up with the name, The Social Modern Matchmaking, and made a website, and the business was born. So, I would say there is, to answer actually your question of the connection between TV and matchmaking, is really just being able to ask people the right questions. In TV, it's all about, you want that good soundbite, or you want to ask the right question to get the right answer out of someone. So for me, and what I'm asking of making sure if people are ready, figuring out who they want to date, it's all about asking those questions, making people feel comfortable in what could be a very kind of high stress, high pressure situation of telling someone your deepest, darkest secrets, baggage, and everything related to dating.
That's interesting. I especially like that last part because we can very much relate on the deep, dark secrets. Don't worry, we're not going to tell them yours, clients.
I was going to say, tell me more. What kind of deep, dark secrets are you hiding, Nathaniel?
Maybe a few. All right.
I'm
So
intrigued.
no, we're not. This is a podcast about you and about matchmaking. Is this just in the Denver area that you're doing matchmaking? Does it, and then does it matter how large the population is for your area? What does your process look like in those kinds of? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll start with the Denver question. So yes, I am based in Denver. It's my hometown, so I love it here. And I really work with people all over Colorado, and also anyone willing to relocate to Colorado, which seems like pretty much everybody these days. If you live in like San Francisco, New York, LA, everyone's moving here. So I definitely work with people, nationwide, and also have a really amazing network of other matchmakers that I send people to who come to me wanting me to matchmake them, but I just don't have someone in Louisiana. So I send them to other matchmakers. So if you are listening, let me know and I can still connect you with someone, even if you're not in Colorado or wanting to relocate. And then the process in terms of working with me, really starts with us just having a conversation, kind of like this podcast, but we're not going to broadcast it or record it. We will, chat about what you're looking for. I want to get to know you, your past, your present, your future, everything. A really important question I ask is your values. That helps me determine what you're looking for in an ideal partner. And we now, of course, do this all over Zoom, but back in the good old days, used to be in person and lots of coffee and drink meetings for me.
I'm curious because you mentioned too that when you started getting deeper into this career change, that there were just some things that you didn't feel matchmakers were providing. And now that you're deep into this and know all these other matchmakers where you're, I'm guessing, able to validate that those feelings and find different, like what are you liking in the fellow matchmakers that you're finding? What are you disliking? And initially, what was missing that you were referring to? And is that still the case within the industry?
Yeah, so I'll start with, initially what I felt like was missing. Just had a list for a second there. So initially what I thought was missing was, authenticity and just being down to earth. My vibe is not at all like I only work with billionaires, kind of thing. I am much more so I want to be your friend. I want to get to know you. I'm going to be the person you're sharing all these things with and talking about your dates. So I want you to feel comfortable with me, like I'm your friend, not like I am some super rich matchmaker who only works with people with a certain net worth. So that was the feeling that I really got, that it was kind of for either like older people, maybe in their 50s and 60s, who just had a lot of money to blow and wanted to find their second marriage. So instead, I was like, hey, why doesn't this happen for millennials who all we've known is dating apps, And a lot of what I do is just telling millennials, hi, I'm here, I exist. And I think, I work with people of all ages, but just being down to earth is what I felt like a lot of matchmaking was lacking. And I definitely see that though, as I meet more and more matchmakers, that people fit that same vibe that I'm trying to put out there too. So, part of what I do is just fighting against the whole stigma of, maybe someone worked with one of these other companies and then they come to me and they just assume I'm the same. So, I almost prefer when it's like a one-on-one situation or a smaller, company like mine where there's just two other people. So, I think it can be done well when matchmaking companies become larger and franchise, but I think it is such a high touch business, and very similar to what you guys do, that it is a difficult thing to scale in the right way.
So, and that leads me into the question. I know Nathaniel started off with asking about your process, and I just want to dig a little bit deeper into your process. So, how long have you been at this for now?
Yeah, almost 3 years, which is
Okay,
crazy to me. Yeah.
congratulations, by the way. The 5-year mark is always the big hurdle. So you got 2 more years to get to that, and then you're golden. I'm curious how your process has evolved over the last 3 years. Are you taking more intake forms? Are you looking at more data? Your database must be growing. So how are you kind of improving your process or getting a little bit more detailed and then competing with the Hinges and the Tinders of the world from like maybe a data standpoint or a processing standpoint?
Yeah, so I honestly don't view dating apps as competition. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I encourage my people to also use dating apps if they want to. A lot of people come to me and they're like, I'm burnt out on dating apps. I never want to log in again. Just help me. And then in that case, I'm like, please don't ever do that again. But there are some people who kind of enjoy that and maybe they have a lot of extra time. They kind of want to just do that while they're watching TV at night. Cool with me. I tell everyone, use every outlet you can. I had a client I've been working with for 8 months, and he actually just found someone on Bumble that he really connected with. And honestly, that's still a success story for me because a lot of what I do is coaching people and setting them up for success. So whether they meet their person at a grocery store, through a blind date, or on a dating app, or at a work meeting, they know how to handle it and know how to date and do it well because none of us truly know how to date. We all assume it, but a lot of what I do is teaching people how to date. And I just answered that last question, but then I missed the first one. So what was the first one?
Yeah. The first question was just more of how your process has improved over the last 3 years.
Oh my gosh. If you guys talked to me like 3 years ago, well, 3 years ago, this was like a baby idea in a bar. But it has changed so much. At first I was using an Excel spreadsheet to write down everyone's info. Now I have a whole CRM that I have personalized so that I can match people based on preferences that I deem important and things that they say are more important or less important. I've definitely elevated what I ask and what I know, and done so much reading and research in terms of psychology and dating, and just learning through experience has been exponentially helpful.
How would you say, Abby, you really know when somebody is ready to find love?
This is always a fun question because the answer is it depends. But there are definitely things I look for because people definitely come to me and they're not ready. I would say, the main ones are people who are still going through divorces. I get a lot of those. And I definitely don't work with anyone who isn't officially divorced, finalized. It's just a thing that I do because my people probably wouldn't be happy if they went on a date with someone who's still married. If people are still hung up on an ex, if they talk really negatively about them, if they just talk about it the whole time that we're meeting, I know that they're going to bring that up on a date and I know it's going to be horrible for that person. So yeah, just I think a lot of things with exes and past things, I can tell people aren't really ready, but also people who haven't really had any experience dating. I have a lot of people who come to me who maybe had one relationship in college and now they've just focused on their career and it's 10 years later and they've never gone on a date. So with both those people, I kind of treat it the same where we're like, let's rewind, let's do some coaching, let's maybe bring in another dating coach, maybe even go to a therapist, maybe we do some practice dates to really help them feel ready too.
That's very fascinating. I know that later in the conversation, we're going to talk more about this coaching piece because when we hear from the matchmaking process, we hear about the matchmaking part and not the prep work. And we all know that the prep work is very key for success. I didn't even think about someone who just hasn't had the experience in a long time, or maybe ever, and what it would take then for you to get them situated so that they are well positioned to be able to because they might be feeling completely ready, you're saying, but may not be fine tuned to the point where that's going to really show. So that seems extremely important. So I'm going to hold off on any follow ups on that. I definitely have some, but I know we're going to talk about that later. When we've talked before in the past, something that really struck me, right, when we were talking about how do you find your demographics, your criteria for your demographics, and you were speaking about a major trend in the industry where many matchmakers will focus on, say, having men versus women as clientele, and why that is. Can you talk a little bit about some of the trends similar to that, and specifically that one as well, as to what you see from an industry standpoint as to how people work with individuals?
Yeah, it really surprised me, and it honestly surprises almost everyone I talk to that some matchmakers refuse to even work with women. So I am not one of those. I work with women, but I have a lot of matchmakers. They won't do it, and they look at me like, "You crazy? Like, what are you doing?" So the reason is, at least from my experience and what I've heard from other matchmakers, is you work with a man. It's so much easier to find probably 100 women for him to date because women flock to us matchmakers like crazy. Every piece of thing, every event I do, every any kind of marketing is all targeted towards men because they're the ones that are kind of harder to convince to come to a matchmaker. And I am super curious because I have the three of you here. Would you ever hire a matchmaker if you were single, or if you are single? I'm just kind of curious if you guys don't mind filling me in too, since I have my little market research group here.
I'll take the plunge first. So I guess would I hire a matchmaker? So to give you a little bit is I was in a long-term relationship, got out of that, and I had to get back into the dating scene, which was kind of nerve-wracking for me, to be completely frank.
Yeah.
And I ended up just finding my current girlfriend through a friend, and I was on apps, which was interesting. I wasn't a huge fan of the apps, in just a different way of, it just felt very business-like to me in a weird way. And I think maybe because it's part of like what we do in the industry, but it was also a really good opportunity to kind of get practice of just talking or just meeting other people. So that was interesting. I never really thought about a matchmaker, but now that I've gone through the process, and if I were ever to be in the process, I would be more open to the idea. And I think that it's one of the reasons is that, on our other podcasts that we talked about just this last week about the app side of things, is I do think it's a numbers game. And I think that also you do have this idea of romance. And so you want to find somebody through that kind of fairy tale ideology. And there's an allure to that. But at the end of the day, regardless of how you meet, you still are probably going to have that connection. So, and I talk about this because my girlfriend Beck and I actually talked about it, where we met through friends of friends, which is kind of like a matchmaker. That's not an official matchmaker, right? That's what a lot of people meet. But that's how we met. And it was kind of a blind date. We really didn't know each other. We didn't really see each other, but we had like instant connection. And so you still had that romantic or connection-based situation, even though it wasn't like I saw her at the grocery store and walked up to her and said, "Hey, you're so beautiful." So I think that the idea of how you actually just get that first interaction or meet, I'm less romantic or think it needs to be in a way that would be that. So I think I'd be more open to a matchmaker. I probably would personally lean towards a matchmaker than an app, because again, the apps just make me feel like I'm prospecting for my business. And so it just was a little odd for me, but that might be a bias based off of what we do in-house. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Wait, and I'm also so curious, and guys, stop me if I'm getting way too off track, but Tim, when you first met your girlfriend, you said it was an instant connection. I want to know more about that.
Sure. Yeah. We're going to get deep. I'm ready. Yeah, it was just, we connected on a level that it was just easy. It was just like I've known her for a long time, like right off the bat. So it was just a weird feeling where I had been on other dates and had met other people, and it wasn't the same kind of vibe. And so like the first connection was just like, where it was just natural. Like, I guess that's the best way I would put it. It was just very natural feeling. Like, it was just like, okay, yeah, this is super easy. And it just continued to be like that, where there was no, friction in a way. So natural. Like, it was easy. That's how I would probably explain it. Yeah.
That's what I tell everybody, that a first date, it should feel comfortable. You should be curious to get to know the person more. You should think they're remotely cute, if not hot. So it sounds like you had all those things. I'm always just
I checked all those boxes. Yes.
yeah, because we do, like you were saying, we romanticize this
Mhm.
first date so much that sometimes you can get let down, or you're like, there were no fireworks, or I don't know she's the one in 2 hours. And I do a lot of coaching to just get people out of that mindset where they expect that.
Yeah. Which makes a lot of sense.
Nathaniel, you talk about your story all the time. I'm really curious about what your answer would be. This is a great question Abby has asked. I love that you asked this.
Am I allowed to ask questions? I don't want to step on your
You
Oh
toes.
bet you
no,
are.
this is.
Okay.
I love to talk about myself. Oh yeah, who doesn't? No, Dan, you go first.
I feel like the question should actually be asked to my wife because I think she would say in a half joking manner, yeah, definitely he would do that. And I would. And I think that's that, she probably would say something like and I think she'd be right about this too. The coaching piece would be very, very valuable because if something happened to her, I have not dated in a very long time. And she probably would say like, hey, if she was coaching me from some distant whatever afterlife thingamajiggy might be out there, she'd probably say things like, hey, you can't break into song every time you meet somebody when you're having like dinner. Not everyone's gonna love that. Like I wouldn't know, right?
Is that what you
So
do?
a lot of times we do break out a song. Sometimes we just sing to the cats or whatever be the case. But nonetheless, like there are definitely things that I'd have to be like, hey, nope, got to tone that back. So I think that would be very valuable. So in all honesty, I would definitely do it. The thing for me too is a very brief stint tried that whole dating app thing over a decade ago, and I don't like it. It could have been that JDate for me only had 8 people in Madison, and that wasn't easy. But it's not me. I don't love tech. We do a lot in tech, have a lot of tech clientele, and I really like them. But the tech itself, not my deal. So I think for me, it would probably make a lot of sense. But in all seriousness, the other issue that I would have that I imagine comes up quite a bit too is I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I would be very, very concerned about entering the dating world, having her in the picture, because it would be a serious consideration if anything threw her for a loop. I wouldn't want to do that. I
Mhm.
could see it actually keeping me, if something happened to my wife, out of the dating pool, because I wouldn't know how to handle it with having, wanting to put her concerns and interests first, but yet, of course, still wanting to find that person and appeal to their interest. That seems very complicated to me and something that I just don't think I could handle by myself, at least well. And I'm a big believer in if it isn't your area of expertise, you find someone to help you with that.
I agree. I kind of use the analogy with people of like, you hire someone maybe to clean your house or to fix your roof, or maybe even you send out your laundry if you're that fancy, and then our love lives, we're just like, oh, I got this. I don't need any help. I'll just like have my friends will send me some funny ways to text people and I'll be good.
I actually it okay. So first, I see it as from what Dan and Tim have said. I see it as more of in a if we were talking about before I met my wife, or if we were talking about, as Dan mentioned, like if my wife was out of the picture and I was back in the dating world. So I met her through it wasn't even an app then, it was chemistry.com. So this was pre where apps became a thing. So the desktop version, that's how we met. And that really worked for me because I too knew it was a numbers game, and I was perfectly okay with that concept
Mhm.
because that kind of that kind of hews towards my nature, I would say. And it also gave me a sense of control, which I'm all about control as much as I can. So it gave me that sense of security in that I could choose. I shouldn't say that. It gave me the illusion that I was in control of who would
When really an algorithm was just determining it all.
I was going to say that it's actually the females who would be choosing me to speak with me, so that I really wasn't in control of that. But it gave me a sense of security in knowing that I had some say and I could control when I wanted to pick it back up, because the fatigue is real when it comes to the app dating. At the same time, my concept of a matchmaker, honestly, this has been extremely enlightening, because I never thought of matchmaking as what it sounds to be, is like you're coaching people, you're teaching them a framework of how to interact with people. If I had known that then, I would have signed up like that, because I would definitely use the help. But I have no concept of that at that time. No, so if I was past my marriage, if my wife Ying was no longer in the picture for whatever reason, I would sign up with you or some other matchmaker in a minute, because I would definitely need to be, I shouldn't even say retaught. I would just need to be taught. Because my first date with my wife was not exactly something for the history books. I remember I took her to a restaurant where she did not know anything on that menu. It was a Greek restaurant. She's Chinese, so she had no sense of what was on that. And she had, come on, Greek words, come on. She didn't know anything on that, so she chose shrimp. So kissing her on that first date, we kissed
You guys
for a
kissed
few
on the
hours.
first date, huh?
Oh
was
yeah.
gonna say, you kissed on the first date?
Oh
This
yeah.
is great.
I went for it. It was a terrible. I can't even remember what I said, but it was some stupid excuse. And then it just happened. It's terrible. It was terrible from the sense of my approach, I should say. And then because she had the shrimp, wasn't exactly the best.
I'm curious if she's going to edit this piece here out or if she's going to highlight it. I'm not really sure which way she's going to go.
That's why I feel comfortable saying it, because she's in control of what appears and what doesn't. So,
oh my gosh, your wife is editing the podcast. I didn't know that.
Yes, Ying is my wife. Yes, the editor. She's our creative guru.
Ooh, wow, she's gonna love listening to this one.
She'll laugh a lot, and then she'll probably cut the entire thing.
Luckily, her parents don't understand, don't speak English, so I think you're okay.
I really did hit the jackpot. That is very true. I cannot communicate with my in-laws, so I don't have to worry about that natural issue that accompanies being an in-law. But I mean, I communicate through other means. I just show my appreciation and love for my wife when I'm in front of her family, and they can clearly see that. And plus, it's been, good God, it's been almost 10 years since we met. So they've gotten used to me. I just grow on people.
Abby, is it a red flag? Is it a disqualifier if you have a man with the criteria where he says he wants to have it so that he's not able to communicate with his in-laws? Is that an issue or not an issue?
I wasn't looking for it. It just happened.
Yeah, it depends on the person. I'd call it more of just a yellow flag. Proceed with caution.
All right.
See what happens.
So Abby, what do you think about all of our answers to your group? Is this what you typically hear from men?
Yeah, no, I think it really makes sense. I also think that you guys are probably also more kind of open-minded than some men that may be like, oh, I don't need that, and a trend that I notice with a lot of the people I work with, men and women, is they're either one of those, like they kind of are into like self-growth. They either read a lot of books or into podcasts, go to therapy, done work on themselves. And then they're like, well, of course I'd hire a matchmaker. And there are some people I tell them like, they don't need me. Like for example, one of my fiance's friends, he moved back here from San Francisco, and, I initially did an interview with him and put him in my system, and, he was just on the apps and he was loving it, having a great time, going on dates every week. So I was like, you don't even need me. I was like, if I find someone exceptional, I'll let you know. But, some people, they have to come to it kind of in their own time, or, I'm not for everybody, for sure.
Got it. Okay. Got a niche market. So I'm curious so you mentioned events. So how critical are dating events to your clientele's success? Is it extremely important?
It's, again, I hate to say it depends on the person. I do have some people that do really, really badly in a group setting. So those people, I would say it's critical they don't go because it's going to ruin their confidence or they're going to feel so awkward. But I think it's a really great way. I always tell people to meet people all at once. And, if you're listening and you're like, well, I'm not in Denver, but I want to go to singles events, I always tell people, go to a meetup. Even just kind of being around people where you all have a common interest. Like, for example, I hosted a 420 yoga event. There were so many connections made at that event. Well, A, because people were high, and B, because it's people who like yoga, who, are into the whole 420 thing. They already have like a handful of things in common. So, boom, there you go. So the events are just kind of a really cool way to also connect people. And, if you are a more introverted person, doing activities that you love, you will kind of be able to then strike up conversation with other people who also like those activities while you're there.
Was that event at 420?
It was on 420, yeah.
Oh, that's great. So what is that going to look like in the future as the country and world are reopening up from a year and a half plus pandemic? Is that going to be, what's that going to look like? I mean, my wife was just saying the other day, we were seeing some friends and she's like, afterwards, she's like, I forgot how to talk to people face to face. I'm sure you're going to see a lot of that. Like, what's that? How is that going to change? And how are you going to adapt to that?
Yeah, I've been doing some in-person events very in small groups and in a very safe way with masks, etc. As it's been warming up here in Denver, as we can be outside. And yeah, I do notice that kind of the first thing everyone says is, "Ooh, I haven't done this in a while," or like, I'm kind of there as the person that when you feel awkward, you come talk to me. And then I can, introduce you around. But I have noticed, even myself, it's kind of weird interacting in a large group in a social situation. And everyone who kind of comes to the party, you always watch, you're like, they don't know if we're going to hug. They don't know if you're going to handshake. They don't know if you're going to elbow. They don't know if you're going to just do like, hi. It's just so funny.
Makes a lot of sense. So one of the other questions I have for you, Abby, and this is an interesting one because we get this a lot where there's usually a big misconception about our industry and what an advisor should provide. And we have turned that question around and we have people ask and what we've learned from our client base is that they just aren't informed about what we should be providing and what that looks like. I view your business or your industry very similar because I understand that you're going to connect me with people, but at the same time, I wouldn't know what to ask from you, what you're going to provide, because I've never done it, nor do I actually know anybody who's actually used a matchmaker. So what I've been falling back on lately, I'll go back to my COVID shot where the lady told me all the stuff, and then she's like, "Do you have any other questions?" And I asked back, "What questions am I not asking, and what questions should I ask?" Because I don't know. I'm not informed and I don't know what to or what not to ask. So my question for you is, what should clients be asking from you to say, this is what I should provide? Or if you were to go to a matchmaker, this is what you should ask to get what they should provide.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Because I think there is a lot of misleading that can happen, probably a bit in the financial world as well as in matchmaking. I would always tell people, I think people are so focused on success rates. I would not even worry about that. If you're working with a matchmaker, ask them to connect you with someone who found their person, and then also ask them to connect you with someone who didn't find their person. Because then you can really hear right from the source. I can think of two people that I could connect you with, and you can also see, does that matchmaker have good relationships with their clients? Because I think that's the most important thing. And I would also ask too, what that matchmaker is expecting of you. Because I always had this conversation with my clients, and I don't know if a lot of other matchmakers do, but I always tell people, like, I expect you to tell me when you go on other dates. And, then that kind of opens the conversation for us to both talk about that. And then, I would also ask kind of what their approach is to dates and, maybe to finding matches, because everyone kind of does it differently. Some people hire recruiters to find your matches. Some matchmakers do it themselves. Some matchmakers have a huge database. So kind of nice to know where those people are coming from. Also good to ask, what the people are like in the database, or what the people are like that they're searching with. Because, I think the saying of you surround yourself with, people who are like you, if all those people in the database are kind of awful and maybe don't know what they're looking for, then maybe that matchmaker doesn't really know what she's doing or he's doing.
Good answer. And my final question, are you one of the most well-connected people in Denver due to your job?
Yes. So kind of beyond just connecting people for love, I also love to connect people for business and for friendship. And actually every day this year, minus the weekends, I have met a new person in Denver. So I don't know how many days
Wow.
of the year there have been so far. But I truly am a people person and just love meeting people. So I just think that, it's part of my job. So if you have a matchmaker who maybe isn't even in your city and is matchmaking there, that may be slight yellow flag. You might want to figure out what's going on.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's an excellent last question Tim had, but I had one other, not to take away the steam of that last question, but I was really curious. Could you talk a little bit about what that coaching experience looks like?
Yeah, so it kind of involves a lot of things. Like I'll give you an example of a couple people I'm working with right now. So, it kind of starts with, not even going on dates. So we first, maybe for the first couple weeks, maybe in the first couple months, we just are like getting you ready to go on dates. So I have a woman that I'm working with right now, and we're waiting 3 months to go on dates. So she's doing coaching with me. We also have a professional dating coach that's doing coaching with her. I'm not technically certified, just by my experience, I can help people. And then I also have her working with an astrologist to help her also manifest love, learn about how she connects with people and what that looks like and how it feels. I also have her working with a stylist and myself. So we go shopping, we help her feel confident, we do coaching on what to wear. We did a makeup lesson. So we do coaching on how to present yourself, what makeup looks good for you, and, help her practice doing that. And sometimes I even throw in a personal trainer in there too, because all these things together, encompass the whole coaching of making you feel confident, making you feel like you can put your best foot forward. And people always just feel, super pampered and taken care of. And you're just naturally going to feel awesome when we finally get you on that date.
Do you see from that people have a lifestyle change, like after, so they find somebody, it was a success, and they continue to implement what you kind of taught them to date? Because to me, it's almost like a little bit of like a lifestyle coach, or like a lifestyle change in a way. Do you see a lot of that success as well, outside of just matching with that new person?
Yeah, I definitely do. And, honestly, not all my clients' goals are to find their person in 6 months.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just like, hey, in the next 6 months, let's just get you on some dates, get you back out there, and just get you feeling confident. So, I know that sounds a little weird because my job is to help people find their forever person, but sometimes that's not everyone's goal. Sometimes, and I like to say, people sometimes re-sign, of course, after 6 months, sometimes after a year we haven't found someone. But I like to think that after 6 months, people have the tools that they hopefully don't need me. It's kind of weird because I don't want repeat customers. I want people to go find their person or use what I have taught them and use the resources I've given them to find their person. Because if people keep coming back and aren't learning, then I feel like I'm probably not doing my job too well. So, yes, weird business model. Please don't come back to me and go find your person.
Some final thoughts to bring us to closure here. I haven't dropped a quote for a while, and I do love doing that. So it's either that or I start singing like Fiddler on the Roof. So we're going to go with a quote for everybody's sake. And I will quote one of my favorites, which is Mark Twain. But I'm going to change it a little bit. Sorry, Mark. So to get the full, and he will use the word joy. So to get the full value of love, he uses joy. For the full value of love, you must have someone to divide it with. I feel like that's very appropriate between these two industries.
Oh, for sure. I love that. We can change it. That's okay. We won't tell him.
Be fine.
Nathaniel, what do you got for your final thoughts?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, had I known that a matchmaker was more about the coaching, the teaching of the framework, that really appeals to me. And I would have been far more open to the concept. I shouldn't say even open. I just didn't know. It was ignorance. So, and I can definitely see the value in that piece about where I like the control aspect of working with apps, but then simultaneously receiving that coaching and understanding of this process and being taught how to interact. That would have been extremely valuable for me. I failed to mention on the with my wife, the second date was much better, in my opinion. It was a lot more. We were a lot more, and then to Tim's story, I felt then a lot more of a connection. I'm just glad she gave me a second chance.
Well, I think that is such a good point. I want to take this recording and send it to everyone I know, because sometimes if the first date isn't magical, we're like, I'm done. But look at you. You got another chance and now you're married. I love it.
Thank you.
Second chance is always great.
Yeah.
Abby, thank you so much for joining us. And my final thoughts are really kind of coming down to, I love that you asked the question of what we would do. I think it's a vulnerable question to be upfront and honest about it. And I think that goes into my final thought about getting uncomfortable. And you really do have to get uncomfortable to make strides, and move forward. And I think that really has to do with just going on that first date. It's not always the most comfortable. It's nerve-wracking. It's nervous. And I think even working with somebody like yourself is uncomfortable because you kind of have to lay down that pridefulness. You kind of have to lay down some things. And maybe I'm speaking from a male's perspective, but you really kind of have to do that and embrace it and just say, I don't know everything. I don't maybe know how to date. I don't maybe know how to put myself out there, and admit that, and then be willing to accept help to kind of get out there to be successful in whatever you deem the goal or success may be. So my final thought is that it's okay to be uncomfortable, because typically it results in good outcomes. So thank you for that. And it was a wonderful question. It was great to hear what Dan Nathaniel said as well. And everything that you had mentioned. It's fascinating to hear the other side of the matchmaking outside of the AI world of things these days.
Yeah, I guess my final thoughts are, I love, what you were just saying, Tim, about getting out of your comfort zone. Do those things that are uncomfortable. You will grow as a human. If it's matchmaking, come chat with me. If it's skydiving, go do that. I cannot help you in that realm. And of course, I'm assuming this is my time for a shameless plug of, if you liked what I had to say, if you just want to chat more about matchmaking, or maybe finding a matchmaker in your city too, I would love for you to reach out to me. My website is thesocialmm, as in modernmatchmaking.club. You can go in there, you'll get all the info. You can book a time with me or my other matchmaker, Margaret. You can also text me. I have no boundaries. I put my phone number everywhere. And my number is 303-842-4762. And just say, hi, I want to learn more about matchmaking. And I get those texts every day. So I'm happy to answer them, and I won't think you're creepy.
Well, thank you, Abby, for sharing all of these thoughts with us today. It really is such an honor to bring people together. So we appreciate what you're doing. We know it's not always an easy task, but it's one it seems like you have a lot of fun with, and that's a big comfort for people. So again, thank you so much for being here and doing what you do. And thank you, audience, for joining us again for another podcast. We greatly appreciate you. Have a great evening. We'll see you again. Take care.
Thank you for taking the time to start your journey of thinking differently and listening to LBW talk about stuff they love. Until next time,